And this is also in Schoology, so you are welcome to check it out in Schoology. And there's one more slide I need to do, but I'll get that done by tomorrow. So this week we're going to cover, get that up for you. This week we're going to cover chapter 11, and then we're just looking at the origins of World War II. So like I said, we're going to do a few extra things that the other classes probably don't do, just because I think there's some interest in it. So we'll review chapter 11, lessons 1, 2, and 3. Lesson 3 is on the Holocaust. So on Thursday, we're going to watch that video together. And it's almost an hour, so we'll watch maybe half of it on Thursday, and then we can watch the rest of it on Monday. And I do have a video assignment that goes with the video, so I'll get that to you guys ahead of time. And it's basically a woman named Kitty. She goes back to Auschwitz, and she she explains what happened there, and she does it from this very her presence in the video is that she's just very forthwith, and she just tells it like it was, without a ton of emotion, which is really interesting, and that's actually something we can talk about. So it's a really cool video, and like I said, even before we get from neutrality to war, we'll talk a little bit more about the Hitler Youth. I'll see if I can get people coming tomorrow. So if we don't get through all of this week, that's okay. This isn't a really important unit, and it kind of sets the stage for America even today, because after World War II, I mean, people say after World War I is when we became a world power, but I really think it was after World War II. So, okay.
I just talked to Trevor really quick.
Yeah.
He said he does not have Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay. Okay, I will, you know what, I'll snap him after we're done. Well, I can snap him right now. And just tell him he can come he's supposed to be in school right now.
Oh, he's supposed to be in actual school?
Yeah, isn't it, you guys, is it A through J? Or is it A through K?
For what?
For the first group.
For the first group, A through...
Is it A through J?
I'm not.
Maybe he's not supposed to be here. If you're talking to him right now, just tell him that I'm going to snap him after we're done with class.
All right.
Thanks. Okay, so could World War II have been prevented? Now, that's something we can talk about maybe when Trevor is back in class tomorrow. I don't know if it could have been. That's a hard question to answer. And this next one we'll talk about more when we talk about the Holocaust. Why do some people fail to respond to injustice while others try to prevent it? So we'll talk about that a little more in the context of the Holocaust and even what Stalin did, which we'll talk about today. Okay. So what economic and political conditions following World War I encouraged dictatorship? So the really important thing to know is that one of the reasons that, I'll go back here, there was a rise, and there's slides on this coming up, in the dictators in the world is because of World War I causing the Great Depression ultimately. And it was especially bad in places like Germany, where the other country or other places in the world experienced a bit of a rise in their economy after World War I. Germany didn't. Germany went from bad to worse. And the conditions were so bad that the people were really looking for a leader that could take them out of the depression that they were in. And Hitler happened to be that person. All right. So, but like I said, we're not going to just talk about him. Another one that you've probably heard of is Mussolini in Italy. He founded the fascist movement right after World War II or World War I. Basically, fascism, socialism, communism all take the form of the government or the people in charge are more, I don't know if in socialism you would say more important, but can generally take control and help the people. And fascists believe that there needs to be a dictator who's going to lead the government, versus socialists think that the government can lead the people, but that people have a say in it. So we'll see, fascists exploited the fears of the people, especially against communists. So unlike communism, fascists are looking at basically one strong leader and not the entire government taking over everything. And people thought for some reason that was better. And eventually, Mussolini got parliament, which is like our Congress, to persuade the king to appoint him as the premier, which would be kind of like a prime minister, kind of like a president. There's still a king, but he was the leader of the nation. So I think this is just a 5-minute video, so I'll share this with you. Oh, it's a 2-minute video, okay. Oh. Come on. Oh. Oh, this is weird. There we go.
Mussolini capitalized on a deep-seated frustration among Italians. Italy was still a young nation, having only united in 1871. The surge of nationalism that came with unification left Italians hungry for greatness, but feeling disappointed. Its parliamentary democracy was weak and ineffectual, and the economy was terrible. And, as with Germany, the Italians had just suffered through World War I, and people were angry about the way it was fought and the way it was finished.
Piazza Venezia became the stage for a new amped-up kind of nationalism. Mussolini loved big rallies, and from his balcony, offering big promises and simple solutions to complex problems, he whipped his followers into a mass frenzy. They interrupted his speeches with chants of Duce, 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 leader.
What I understand is that it was like a collective dream. It was like hypnosis. Standing in the crowd with thousands of people all focused on one man who was terrific at using his body, his facial expressions, and language to reach their hearts.
Aveva Cesare, il figlio e l'Augusto.
They were going ballistic, even for a hand gesture or a facial expression. Mussolini was an actor, and when he eventually showed up in that window, and he stood in his typical posture with this imposing chin, for the Italians, he was the personification of a greater Italy.
He promised an Italy that would be great, that would be modern, that would be finally unified, where there would be work for everybody.
Okay. All right. So like Hitler, he told the people what they wanted to hear, and he said, "Hey, if I'm leader, you're all going to have jobs, and you're all going to be taken care of, and there will be no more fighting within Italy. Everybody's going to get together and get along, and it's all going to be great." In reality, he couldn't provide all that, but people believed him because they needed something to believe. So that was Mussolini. Then we have Stalin. And if you're ever interested in looking at something in world history, look at more about Stalin. Once again, I have another video I'm going to show you quick here, and then we can talk I'll talk a little bit about him first, and then Stalin took over from Lenin when Lenin died, and they really instituted the Communist Party. And the Communist Party, when you're looking at communism, the government controls everything. So they basically own everything, and in true communism, everyone would be equal, but we all know that that could never happen. So basically, when Stalin came to power, you see this one-party rule. The Communist Party suppressed almost all individual freedoms and liberties. And anyone who disagreed with him was put in a gulag or was killed, including a lot of times their family. So if you look at this, the use of concentration camps and slave labor, contributed to the deaths of 20 million people under Stalin. This is almost 3 times the number of people who died in the Holocaust. So it's crazy to think that, you know, Hitler certainly took people, Jewish people, and others, it wasn't just Jewish people, but mostly Jewish people, and put them in concentration camps or just outright killed them. Stalin was doing the same thing, and yet we ended up allying with him during World War II. So that's something that people don't talk a whole lot about in classes. When you look at the injustices that were going on, why did we decide that we could be an ally with the Soviet Union when Stalin was worse than Hitler probably, and yet you know, we fought against Hitler? And I think one answer to that is Stalin was not aggressing towards other countries at that point in time. He was using his power and keeping it at home. So we turned a blind eye to that. Plus, I don't know that there's much that the U.S. could have done at the time with what Stalin was doing. So it's just something to think about when you're thinking about these leaders during this time and what was really happening. But yeah, Stalin, I mean, if you looked at him the wrong way, he could put you in prison for that. So he was not a good guy. Killed a lot of people. And there's more here. Well, let's see, do we have time? Yeah, we have time. We'll watch this little short. It's just 5 minutes on the rise of communism. Do you have any questions right now, Nolan? Or Olin? Sorry. Okay, so here's Stalin. There's a real lag right now, and I'm not sure what's going on. Usually the internet here at school is so fast.
Early in the 20th century, Russia had a lot of problems. Government mismanagement, bad military defeats, rising inflation, and food shortages. The peasantry demanded more land, as the gap between the wealthy elite and the poor masses grew wider. There were general strikes and uprisings in the streets. The conditions were right for revolution. It came to a head on March the 12th, 1917, when the opponents of Tsar Nicholas II, taking advantage of the unrest, forced him to abdicate the throne. One of the groups competing for power were the Bolsheviks, formed by Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, who would become known as Vladimir Lenin. The Bolsheviks were a revolutionary party that believed the working classes would liberate themselves from the economic and political control of the ruling class and establish a socialist society based on equality. The rise of the Bolsheviks was rapid, in part because the provisional government that was installed until elections were held had postponed much-needed land reform and, against popular opinion, kept Russia in the First World War. Soviet councils elected by workers and soldiers started to appear in more major cities as they gained popularity. Lenin wanted to form a parliament of these Soviets to rule Russia. The Bolsheviks would then control the Soviets. Lenin returned from exile in Western Europe in April 1917. The Bolsheviks seized power in the October Revolution and established the Soviet Union. When Lenin died in 1924, there was no succession plan for a new leader. This led to an internal power struggle between Trotsky and Stalin. Trotsky was head of the Military Revolutionary Committee, and Stalin, General Secretary of the party. Trotsky wanted permanent world revolution and encouraged the working classes, or proletariat, around the world to rise up, while Stalin pushed for socialism in one country. He wanted to secure the communist regime in Russia before looking outward. Stalin's position as General Secretary enabled him to put supporters in powerful party positions, and he was ultimately able to secure the leadership. Trotsky was expelled from the party and then the Soviet Union. Years later, in exile in Mexico, he was assassinated, most likely on Stalin's orders. The Communist Party sought total control over everything. The totalitarian state. In 1927, Stalin introduced the first 5-year plan, designed to turn the nation into a major industrial power within 5 years. Central planning by the government determined where to build factories and what crops to grow. A policy of collectivization meant peasants were forced to pool their land into government-owned and operated farms. Any resistance to the regime was dealt with brutal and deadly force. Millions of farmers were exiled to labor camps in Siberia or simply executed. Stalin became increasingly dictatorial, using propaganda and his secret police to terrorize the people and eliminate potential threats within the party. In Stalin's reign of terror from 1929 to 1930, more than 3 million people were killed. Life got progressively worse for the average Russian, as food and everyday goods became increasingly scarce. Stalin led the Soviet Union through the Second World War. Many millions of his people were killed, but the Soviets were instrumental, along with the Allies, in defeating Germany. Stalin remained in power until his death from a massive heart attack in 1953.
Okay. All right. Did you have any questions about that? Have you studied Stalin at all anywhere else? Mr. Miller used to teach here. Did you? Let's see. This would be his second year gone, I think. Did you ever have Mr. Miller for anything?
I had Mr. Miller for intro psychology.
Oh, the other Mr. Miller. No, I don't think you. I think you would have been. I don't think you would have had him. Anyway, there used to be another Mr. Miller here, and he was an English teacher, but loved Russian history and anything about Russia. So he taught me a whole bunch about Stalin and Lenin, and I don't know. It's kind of a fascinating history to look at. It's not one we really look at here in our school much. When we study U.S. history or world history, we don't really look at the leader that Stalin was. But he was a very strong leader. Obviously, he would be to have this many people. And also just looking at that communism in Russia and how a government could take over everything like they did, it's kind of scary to think about. So, but that was what was going on in the Soviet Union. Now, like I said, we would eventually ally with the Soviet Union. Basically, the only reason we allied them because they helped us defeat Hitler. They didn't want Hitler taking over Europe because they were worried that he would then start infringing on Soviet Union territory. And he had actually there were some agreements made between Hitler and Stalin before the war. And then those agreements were broken at the start of World War II. So, okay. And then Hitler's rise to power. I'll stop here and I'll stop here for today just because I think